Order, order, and welcome to this second evidence session of the Defence Select Subcommittee looking at the experiences faced by women in the military and female veterans. In a week where behaviour towards women across society as a whole have been under scrutiny, it is very topical that today we undertake this inquiry to establish the lived experiences of serving females in our military and women veterans. The Defence Select Committee ran a survey to hear from serving women and veterans, and we received 4,106 responses. 62% of our survey respondents claimed that they had experienced harassment, bullying and discrimination, and 6 out of 10 felt disempowered to make a complaint. This session will explore in further detail the service complaints and justice system, and our witnesses today not only have first-hand experience of this process, but also represent many others who have found it necessary to pursue this route to justice. Again, I would like to thank all the women and men who engaged in our inquiry, whether serving veterans and civil servants. Thank you both. Just an opener, if you don't mind. Within the last year, 12% of military personnel, men and women, experienced bullying, harassment and discrimination. And to put some meat on the bones of that, that equates to around 17,000 people serving today have experienced some sort of abuse. Does this suggest there is something wrong with the institution and the culture of the military? Or is this to be expected given the nature of the job and the numbers involved? If we can start with Emma.
I think it is a wider problem in society, and we've seen that this week very, very clearly. But I think you do have a particular difficulty in the armed forces because women are in a very stark minority there. Therefore, if there is a problem with, for example, patriarchal attitudes, male violence against women, a disinclination to tackle the causes of that, then you are going to see that manifest much more starkly in those kinds of environments. And certainly the women that contact me, and I accept I only see the cases where they've gone wrong, they are not describing isolated incidents. They are describing patterns of behaviour. And then when something catastrophic has happened, they are describing a system that is incapable of helping them address that.
Nicola?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there is a problem. I think it is both a personal problem and a more systemic problem. You said the figure that you quoted, and please correct me if I'm wrong, referred to both men and women that suffer bullying, harassment and discrimination. Yeah. And of course, that is right. Both men and women can suffer that for a variety of reasons. I will say, though, that there are particular cohorts within the armed forces that are more likely to suffer from these matters and therefore more likely to complain. And that would be women and would be ethnic minority service personnel of whatever gender. With regards to particular issues concerning women within this, bullying has a corrosive effect, not just on the person receiving it, but on those around them, because it leads to a toxic workplace environment or a toxic culture. And if women are suffering from bullying, harassment, or discrimination, they could be targeted because of their gender, or the actions themselves or the language themselves are sexually motivated. The issue is where it's more covert, because not all bullying, harassment, and discrimination is overt. Some of it is very subtle, very covert, and the only reason why you know that the person's suffering it is because they have changed. They become more withdrawn, they don't want to associate with people, and very often people don't want to drill into the reasons for that. And certainly I have seen cases which describe exactly that kind of matter. And banter is often used, as good as banter can be for building team cohesion and esprit de corps, it's often used as a way to bully people, because if someone is the butt of the joke and they tell you to stop and you carry on, that leads to that toxic environment. So both men and women can suffer from it, but some cohorts can suffer more than others.
And my final point to yourself, Nicola, we've seen that 1,538 current and former servicewomen have told us they did not make a complaint after experience an incident of bullying, harassment or discrimination. But many have told us that they didn't have faith in the complaints system or thought that it would harm the career. And you have mentioned like mid-level career opportunities being hampered already. But does that number surprise you, and is it a concern to you?
It is of concern to me, and it doesn't surprise me. I'm afraid that's a short answer to your question.
Nicola, maybe I'll just start with you. And looking specifically at specialist support for those who make a complaint, for example, in relation to bullying or harassment and discrimination, do you think that there is enough specialist support available?
In short answer, no. And I think it can fall into two brackets. There is, within the existing system, with the all of those who would be party to resolving a complaint, assisting officers, investigation officers in particular, as well as the deciders, they could have specialist training to deal with these particularly sensitive subjects, but especially where it comes to matters sexual or to do with racism. But here we're talking about women in particular. So the training could be increased, and the training in terms of that specialist training hasn't been increased for those people, and therefore they can't provide the specialist support. Although it would be open to them to, if you like, draft in specialist support if they want. I think another way of getting around that is as recommended in the Wixton report, the Defence Authority is actually set up. I've always said, and I say it again, that the Wixton report was an excellent piece of work. And the recommendations I thought were eminently sensible and very practical. And a key recommendation was a defence authority that would deal with bullying, harassment and discrimination, which would have specialist people in it. And it would come out with the chain of command, but below the ombudsman. If that body was set up, then I think the issue of quality specialist support will be very largely solved, because you would have the specialist people dealing with these matters.
Can I invite Emma? Would you like to respond to that as well?
Just very briefly, it's not just that Wixton hasn't been implemented, it's that it has been watered down. I think it's really important to make that point. So Wixton recommended the creation of a central defence authority sitting outside of the single services. Danuta Gray's report makes clear that is no longer the intention. And somebody needs, with all due respect, somebody needs to explain how that has happened, because there's been no process of consultation that I'm aware of that has resulted in that. And given that the Secretary of State specifically said that they accepted the recommendations, I think somebody does need to explain that. Okay. And in relation to specialist support available to some of these most difficult cases in service complaints, I would say, what specialist support? There isn't any. You have some assisting officers who are doing an absolutely fantastic job in addition to their day jobs. As Nicola says, they're not specially trained, they should be. But I don't see any wider support. And we haven't even got into the issue of sexual assaults and how you support women who've suffered those kinds of problems. So I'll just leave it there, thanks.
Going back to the survey we conducted for the Defence Select Committee, in our survey, 6 out of 10 respondents told us they felt disempowered to make a complaint. Is it the complaint system that's the problem, or the culture?
Is that to me, Chair?
Yes, please.
Thank you. It's the culture and it's the service complaint system. The service complaint system is something that hasn't changed and needs changing. I think Nicola Williams has been very eloquent in talking about the needs for change and how that might happen. She has spent several years saying that the system was not efficient, effective, or fair. And so you have a system which doesn't work for complaints in the first instance. So you can't resolve problems. And that's the first problem. The other problem is the culture, because you can have whatever system you want in place, whatever laws, whatever regulations. And if those people who run those systems or operate in that sphere do not give it the respect that it deserves, then it will never result in justice and it will never work the way that people intended it to work. So in answer to your question, I think it's both.
Graham, can I ask how you set up Justice for Troops and how many people do you represent?
I was in a frontline command position, and by the nature of that, I got involved in service complaints. I became a deciding officer, prescribing officer. That gave me cause for alarm in the way that is executed. But the defining point for me was a lady who was the mother of an air cadet rang me directly. That's unusual to get hold of a base commander, because she got hold of me. And she said her daughter had been raped on my unit by her instructor. That obviously worried me, but what worried me most is immediately I was listening to her telling me I was in denial of the incident, ashamedly. The more she told me, I was in denial of the narrative that it couldn't have happened that way. And thirdly, what might be the impact on me as the base commander when I'm in command of all of this. And it was only the fourth base where I thought, actually, that's exactly why I'm here, to address these issues, whatever the evidence leads us to as an outcome, and then take a learning point from that. When I took it to the chain of command, they didn't think like that. Their position was the allegation would have high impact to the reputation of the service, especially at the anniversary of the Air Cadet organisation at that time. And that triggered off what effectively has been a 10-year journey that led me to think, if this is brutal, and it was for me, and it still is for me in many ways in terms of impact, then I would have concern about more junior people, more vulnerable people, the minority groups, and how they would ever cope with these incidents. And that was really why we set up an organisation that broadly intended to quantify the scale of issue and get the learning and get the knowledge in order to give these people a representative voice and then trying to change the law. So we've got over 500, I guess, serving personnel from the whole military community, really, including families.
Hi, good to see you both. Graham especially worked closely with you. Really pleased to see what you're doing, particularly after your service to your nation as well. There are some unique challenges that face service women. Does that make it more difficult when they actually make a formal complaint? And have we adapted to that? Graham, can I start with you?
From my experience in command, I should perhaps just expand on the context of my answer here, Tobias. I've not just been a commanding officer and a deciding officer on a military unit. I've also been a respondent to 2 complaints from 2 women, 1 military, 1 civil service. So I've seen that process from both elements of defence. And I've been a complainant myself, right through the Defence Council, right through to the Ombudsman, right through to the MOD and including ministers. If I found that brutal, or life-changing definitely and close to life-taking, with all my background and all my resilience and all my experience to draw upon, the minority groups, women, BAME, and the junior ranks, who won't have that background or that knowledge to draw upon, God help them. So, and I do think because of that, especially the minorities, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And that leaves you with a complete crisis of conscience, not just dealing with the incident, but the consequences of the handling of the incident afterwards. And that's where I think you see the real damage to mental health is not just the incident, it's the inaction of the service or the actions afterwards.
Just to pick up on sexual offences, Ahmed, do you think there's a theory practice gap within the MOD? Because you mentioned the Victims Charter, and we've had bystander training, victim service policy, code of practice, and they're looking to set up a witness care unit. And this is all happened and happening. But as you've just said, it doesn't seem to manifest itself on the ground. Why do you think that is? Why have we got this gap?
Chair, I honestly do not know what the answer is. My suggestion is that this has to be a cultural issue. It may be that there is not enough information or training given to those people who are handling these complaints. You know, there should be direction saying, look, once you've got a complaint on your desk involving sexual issues, this is the pro forma that you have to provide. You have to provide all of this guidance. You have to have a sit down with the complainant, explain to them their rights to raise a complaint to the civilian police, explain to them the rights to a legal counsel. These are the documents that the MOD have painstakingly produced for victims. you must give these documents to the complainant and encourage them to speak to welfare. That's what's not happening. So it might be you look at culture, but you might also be thinking, well, there may be very straightforward processes here that are simply being missed. And I mentioned earlier about connecting the dots between welfare support and those complainants who bring a claim.